So, Richard, thanks for joining us. Thought we could start by if you could just introduce yourself.
Yep. So I'm Richard Lalchan. I run a business. I'm a clarity coach, which is a business and life coach, particularly to solopreneurs and creative business owners. And I do a few other things as well. I host St Albans Buzz networking, and I am coming to the end of writing my first science fiction novel called Awaken.
Wow, amazing. To do a bit of everything.
Yes, I like to keep myself busy.
Yeah, you certainly do. And so, in terms of being a clarity coach, that was, I think, the first thing you mentioned.
Hmm.
Why don't you say a bit about what that is?
Yeah, so Clarity Coach is yeah, it is a business and life coach. But one of the things that is core for me is helping people understand their purpose. And when we really know why we're doing what we're doing, we have a much stronger drive to do it. Our motivation is higher, and yet you think about in life, we spend 90,000 hours in work on average. And so many people, so many of us might spend a lot of that time, those hours, doing something that is not really our purpose, that doesn't really engage us, doesn't really motivate us. It's a struggle to get up, just to get out and do it again and again and again. And so, helping people understand what their purpose, what are they placed on this earth for,
Hmm,
if you like, and that's not obviously not just about work. It's about your whole sort of life purpose can really help drive you forwards and have clarity and clarity coach on where you're going. That doesn't mean to say you'll know, and I always have to qualify this because it's not necessarily about having complete path from from A to Z, knowing exactly where you're going along the
hmm.
route because we'll never have that.
No,
But actually, knowing your purpose can actually then help you make wise decisions along that path.
great. And so, in terms of purpose, then that seems to be a central plank of what you're helping people with. So, if someone is struggling to find their purpose, they don't know what they want to do. How would you help them find that?
So yeah, so basically, I mean, people have been doing this for generations, and there are all different theories and different ways of doing it. So one thing that I've settled on is really understanding. So there's two pronged purpose. So if I tell you about my purpose, for
Sure,
example,
yeah.
so the first thing I should say is I'm a Christian. So I believe created by God and put on this earth for a purpose. So well, what is that purpose? Yeah. So I believe my first ultimate purpose is to follow God, do what He wants, um, and then and that's a general purpose for everyone. And second purpose is an individual one um, to each individual. And um, I had clarity on mine. I'll tell you a story when I was back, I think I was maybe 13 years old, 13, 14 years old. And I was sitting on my bed at the time. My dad um, was there as well. And he asked me this question, which sounds quite bizarre now, for a 13-year-old. What would you like to see on a gravestone when you die?
Wow. What a question for a 13-year-old.
And apparently, I said without almost without thinking, is that Richard was someone who made people think.
Wow.
And it's like one of those things, such a long time ago, I can't tell you exactly what, that's the gist of it I get. And I did speak to my dad about it um, many years later. And so that for me was a key thing. Uh, so the things that I do that help people think is crucial. And then tied to the sort of wider purpose, it's like I feel like I exist to encourage, equip, and motivate people to be all they can be.
Mm,
So, and a lot of that is about challenging how people think.
sure.
And so because that's sort of crystallized for me, when different opportunities and things come up, I can evaluate it against that purpose and say, yes, this is a good thing. This isn't a good thing. So,
Amazing. So I guess it seems like you kind of knew your purpose from a very young age. but I would imagine there's quite a few people who you must deal with who don't know. So how do you help them?
Yeah, so actually on my website, claritycoach.net, I have a free tool that people can download. And what that does is that takes you through your vision, your mission, your profession, and so it looks at essentially what are you good at? Yep, so your talents.
Hmm.
Now, what you're good at might not be what you love doing.
Sure.
Yeah, so you've also got what you're passionate about. And then what you're passionate about may be something that actually it may be a struggle to make money out of it. So that's your profession. So then you look at how can those all tie together? And then there's a piece that so many people miss, and that is your mission. So you've got talents, passion, profession, and mission. And the mission is it takes it away, takes what you're doing away from being self-indulgent
Okay.
to actually fitting it in the wider world. So how can the world benefit from what you are doing? And so that puts context on it. So there's a tool, yeah, that you can use that you'll go through, asks you key questions on each of those areas just to work out, tease out those key things for you, and then you can do a summary at the end.
Mm.
So that's the kind of thing that I um, did before I knew it in detail and developed the tool.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
I did to get my own mission statement, if you like.
That sounds interesting because I would imagine you could have people thinking about this now and thinking, well, I don't know what those are. But I suppose what that will help those people to do is to actually think through these things and crystallize things and get clarity
Yeah, exactly.
themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, and it is that thing where you might not these things take time. You know, people have spent years, if not almost a whole lot of their life, kind of trying to work out this thing. And there's a thing in Japanese culture called ikigai,
Yes, I thought
which
that's. But I was thinking, I
yeah,
think I've heard it called ikigai before. Yes,
and that's essentially that mean the closest match in English for that is almost like a reason to be.
right.
Um, and yeah, so that what happened was there was in Okinawa in Japan, there were people were sort of amazed at how old people lived to. You know, it had one of the oldest life expectancies in the world. And so various people did sort of, studies on that. And one of the things that came out is that these people had their ikigai. They knew they had their reason to be. And that doesn't mean to say they were like successful as we might see in the West or anything like that, but it's not about that.
Mm.
It's actually about, it's almost like that contentment in knowing that you're fulfilling your purpose. And so, yeah, that's kind of how Ikigai, and there's lots of books on that, which kind of came out. So, yeah, what I've done in the purpose tool is take sort of elements from different things and sort of crystallize it.
Mm. And that, I guess, interestingly, you're talking about those people living longer, and I suppose it must come down to having. Well, I'm not a spiritual person, but I guess as close as you might get to spirituality and being whole in a way, you've got
Mm,
your purpose
mm.
and you've spent your life dedicated to that. That kind of gives you your life meaning, I suppose. Is that kind of the reasoning behind that, you think?
Um, I guess partly. So yeah, because it covers everything, isn't it? Because we're obviously talking about work and careers and things, but it is your whole life. This includes like even what you're eating as well,
Yeah.
and the studies into those people looked at diet and things like that. So yeah, so it's really knowing, having that, it's raison d'être is the French term, isn't it? Yeah,
Mm.
that reason to be, and there are many ways that you might discover that, whatever perspective you're coming from. There are many ways that you might discover that. And I'm a firm believer in, even as good as my tool is, there is not one tool which is going to solve everyone's problem.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's finding what's right for you.
Yeah. What works for the person.
Yeah.
Um, and so, so I suppose that's kind of why you initially introduced yourself as a a business coach slash clarity coach and lifestyle coach.
Mm.
So How does the lifestyle fit in?
Yeah, well, it's also, let's say if I focused on the business coach, um, what we do in the rest of our life affects how we do our business.
Yeah.
We're holistic beings. You can't easily, there's a whole talk about the work-life balance and things like that, and there's a whole movement of people sort of away from that. Actually, understand, well, we shouldn't be trying. It's not about sort of a balance in terms of like this is when you cut off and this is when you start. Yes, that can be fine and that works for some people, and that can be really good because having that discipline. Um, but actually, we're holistic beings, so
Mm.
sometimes it's not necessarily right to just completely shut off. And that's, I think Richard Branson was always famous for having a notebook on him all the time, and just wherever he was, an idea might come to him, and he writes it down. Why should we wait until we're in work time, as it were,
Yeah,
to do that?
completely. Yeah.
So
It's like comedians, you always hear interviews with them. They always have a notebook. I guess probably they use their phones now
mm,
to write an idea down. And yeah, because like you say, you don't never know when inspiration will strike. And I find
no.
it's always at the worst possible times when you're trying to get to sleep.
Yes, I mean that is a huge challenge, which and actually coming back to the ikigai thing, saying sleep is an important part of that. And in terms of, again, when you've got clarity on purpose, then you've got a reason for going to bed, if that makes sense. So you're not just thinking about your immediate needs, you're thinking about long term as well.
Mm,
So if I sacrifice now, I'm going to gain later.
yeah.
So it just gives you, yeah, the stronger your purpose is, it gives you the ability to make decisions and filter through everything you're doing.
I suppose it's kind of similar. Like if you work for a company and they've got a very particular purpose, if you're faced with a new challenge, you kind of know what to do because you know the ethos behind what you're doing. Um, and so it's easier to take on new challenges because you know the overarching goal and what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because you think so many people get demoralized at work and then eventually leave because what they're doing, they can't see how it integrates or how it affects the purpose of the company. It just seems like if I turn up and do this, go through the motions and do that, no one's going to matter. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And so that again is another really good example of why you need to be connected into your purpose.
It does make everything else easier.
Yeah.
Um, and so obviously you must have well I know that you've worked with lots of different small businesses and solopreneurs. Do they have any particular common problems that they tend to face?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of the challenges nowadays tend to be, well, I would say one of the biggest challenges is getting clients. So
Yeah, of
so
course.
but that's almost like a sort of, what's the word? Like a symptom, not the cause, as it
Yeah.
were. And um, so yes, if I was to break that down more, the things that people have spoken to me a lot about over the years are just things like being stuck. It could be in different areas, just don't know what's the next best step to take in
Mhm.
whatever they're doing. Um, Tied to that is just being overwhelmed, which we're all aware of in our sort of social media, information saturated society. So being overwhelmed. And then another one, which is becoming more and more common, is being alone, being lonely. And you've got more and more people, starting up business, running the business themselves, and they might not have contact with many other people. And that may be, they may actually be work for a company that employs others, but because of with remote working and things like that, there's even more people spending a lot of time on, I'd say too much time, on their own.
Mm.
So coaching them through different ways to solve that, and it's not just one way. An obvious thing might be, well, go out to a cafe, and that is one way, but it's also changing mindset. So it's understanding about, well, why am I alone? And sometimes if you're running a business on your own, it can be like, well, my business. I need to do everything.
Yeah.
And so you've got that whole challenge of then outsourcing. Well, why would I outsource? The time it takes me to tell someone else to do something, I could have done it twice myself. I've heard that so many
Yeah.
times.
And that might be true the first time, but if you keep working with them, it should
Yeah,
be easier.
exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of back to thinking long term. If you're thinking, too many of us just think short term. It's like
Yeah.
I've got this problem now, I need to solve this problem now. Um, but actually, how you solve that problem will affect you down the line. And so, if you don't take on that help, don't, whether it's get a virtual assistant or get someone else to produce your video for you or something like that, just things which I've done recently, then you're just putting so much more stress on yourself, rather than yeah. So one quick example for me is actually probably what I should have done, which I didn't do this time.
Mm,
This is for a crowdfunding video that I made for my science fiction book novel. Um, I acted in it myself,
okay.
and I do kind of like acting, so there was a pull for me to do that. But in hindsight, it would have been better if I'd got someone else to do
Why?
that.
So why is that?
So, well, if I got a professional actor, that's for a
Okay.
start. They would be better. But also, it gives me, and this is a really important point, where it gives me the opportunity to step back. So I'm not in it. I'm stepping back and I'm looking, I'm observing, I'm directing, I'm producing, rather than so I can see things that I wouldn't be able to see if I'm acting. Yeah.
You're able to have a more of an overview of everything.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it would be a better, I think overall it would have been a better product. I mean, saying that, I'm quite proud of the video.
Well, you're gonna have to tell us whether you can see it at some point.
Yes.
Okay, so you yourself there have described um, having the same problems everybody else does, really, I suppose, in that you want to make sure everything is right and works exactly as you have it in your mind, and you feel that's taking a step back or delegating to someone else, you could potentially compromise that. But what you're saying, I suppose, is if you do that, you'll be able to have the bigger overview and to produce better work in the long term, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So short time, it's time consuming. The last time I had a virtual assistant, explaining everything to them takes time. And all of that time that you're spending is time that you could be doing the thing that you're asking them to do. So, but long term, I worked with a virtual assistant, particularly maybe 10 years ago now. And because we were working for a while together, maybe a couple of years, I think in the end, she just got it. So I had to tell her less and less, and she could just get on and do stuff. And that was a really exciting time in the business,
Mm.
because I could achieve so much because of that. So yeah, it's about sacrificing the now to gain later.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And also, there's the thing of valuing your own time, and if you can, if you know roughly what your hour is worth, then you can outsource to someone cheaper, and you actually make money back. But that is a mindset shift that can be difficult to make.
Yes.
For me, but
Mm.
I've made that now.
Yes.
But you claw back time and you still make a profit, and it's for the betterment of your business overall.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. So you're a coach yourself, and I was just kind of wondering how you got into that, and maybe if you had a coach yourself.
Yeah. So I've got two coaches at the moment, but they're kind of like a husband and wife team.
Okay. So they're not competing. They're
Not
on the same
competing,
team.
no. And so I've been working with them for a year, and but yeah, I've had a variety of coaches over the years, and that's interesting because I get to see different styles of coaching as well, which is obviously really useful for me in the way that I coach. So one of the first coaches I had, it really got me to see just this, because I hadn't really experienced coaching before, and it really sort of opened my eyes to what coaching was. She basically, I describe it as she gave me the kick up the backside to get
Right.
my Creatives Hub organization off the ground. And I've been thinking of it for years, and it just never, yeah, for different reasons, I never actually got it to happen. Then working with her, she basically the first thing she did, or one of the first things she did, was like a backwards flowchart. So you start where, what is this thing looking like when it's finished? And then you work back from there and work out the stages. So the overwhelm that I talked about before, that's one thing that I do with clients to help them break down what are these sort of big tasks that they might have or big goals into smaller chunks so it's more manageable, so it doesn't overwhelm you. So, yeah, so she had a particular style. Then I worked with another coach in the States for a while, um, did really well there, double turnover by the end of time working with her. And yeah, she was a really experienced coach, had founded different businesses and was running well, still is running a coaching business, but does digital marketing. So that was
Right.
exactly right up my street, and really helped me to change some aspects of my business. But in terms of also how I got into coaching myself, so my background is digital marketing, so it's web design and digital marketing, like yourself.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that for over 25 years, and then and the way that I worked with clients, um, I kind of worked out later that I actually had a coaching approach. So I
Right.
was kind of coaching them before I knew what coaching was. And so one example I give is that I would it almost seemed like I'm turning people away. So if a client comes to me, says, can I have a website? I need a website for this particular business. I would be asking them questions like, "You sure you need a website? What um, what do you want it to do? What are you doing so far that that you're finding there's a gap and you need the website for?" And so often they couldn't completely answer those questions because some of the times the reason why they wanted a website was because, well, my competitors have one, um, or I feel I should have one.
Mm.
And so to me, those are not good enough reasons, not strong enough reasons to actually go into a project like that in terms of developing a website, to develop one that's going to work for you.
Yes, that's the
Anyone can, just
absolutely
develop the
agree.
website, no problems. But actually, to do one that's going to really work for you, you need to actually know that this is really what I want to do now and why.
Yeah, you need the purpose again.
Exactly. It always comes back to the purpose. And so, yes, so kind of doing that for a while, I actually felt that I enjoyed that bit more. So actually just teasing those kind of ideas out for people, of people, and um, just helping them uh, in some ways change their perspective on why they thought they wanted a website or whatever it was.
Mm.
And so, yeah, so then I kind of looked into coaching a bit more. I did a 2-day workshop, coaching workshop, and then eventually I did a uh, 6-month coach training course, which was amazing, with a company called Consciously Digital. And yeah, and I did that. I started that the 2 weeks before lockdown, first
Wow.
lockdown. So what would that be? February 2020 I started, and then mid March
So
was
did
the
that
first
begin
lockdown.
in person?
That no, because it's an international organization,
Right.
so people are all over the world. So it's all online. So
Oh, that's
yeah.
fortunate.
Yes.
So, well, I guess one of the things I was going to ask, and it's interesting that you mentioned styles, because when you mentioned that you had two coaches or you've had various coaches over the time, and just from like going to networking events, you always meet a few coaches, and they all seem to have different styles and different ways of
Yep.
communicating. I wondered if you had any advice around finding a style that's right for you,
As in a
as in
business
someone who,
finding a coach that's right for them.
yes, someone looking for a coach. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I would say there is that, or if I tell you my style, that might kind of help to see that. So what I am not is I'm not a coach that cracks the whip. That's just not in my personality to
Mhm.
just kind of like bang on at people. I'm a much more subtle and almost sort of cerebral, if you like, um, way of working. So, and that doesn't work with everyone. You know, there are people that actually need that. You know, it's like, come on, Mike, what have you done now?
Yeah.
And
I felt it then.
so,
I should go.
so I could do that one, a few times, but that's just not consistent part of my character. So, so yes, um, much more. So yes, you get different styles like that, and it does depend on what you want. If you've got clear goals, you know exactly what you want to achieve, you're just having trouble achieving it, then that again may lend itself to a different style of coaching. Whereas again, if you need to discover, and I think that's one of the things I'm good at is helping people discover um, what their whether it's what their purpose is, or and that could be on a big scale or a small scale for a particular project. Um, that's when, yeah, you kind of need a sort of different style. And you'll see, when you look for different coaches, you'll see those sort of big, brash, kind of very bold, very sweary kind of
Yeah.
coaches, which are, yeah, very different style.
Mm.
It-
I guess, yeah. So I guess it comes down to just finding the right one and kind of meshes with your personality, I guess.
yeah, yeah. And one of the things that I do at the beginning as well is just in the free inquiry call, um, uh, is just to have a little chat about personality styles. So you've got all the different like Myers Briggs and various things
Mm.
like that, and DISC, and so that can also help. Always use it as a guide. I
Yeah.
always say with those things, there's no perfect system, so just it can help as a guide to see which kind of coach you're going to relate to more.
Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Um, so one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, I mean, you brought up um, um, lifestyle and social media before, and I wondered because there's obviously lots of different takes on that, and people are on it all the time. And is it good for you? Is it not good for you? What's your kind of ethos on that?
Yeah. Well, I was telling you obviously before we started recording that I've reluctantly got back onto Instagram. Well,
Yeah.
started a new account, I should say. And so, I mean, that's a good place to start in terms of, well, why have I done that?
Mm.
And so, in many ways, if you, from a market, with my marketing hat on, you want to go where your target audience is.
Yeah.
There's no point going to, being on LinkedIn if all your audience is on TikTok or something like that.
Hmm.
And so you've got to go where your audience is. So that's the first thing. But in terms of my take on it as a whole, um, I think it's more destructive than it is positive. So
Just destructive
yeah,
is a very emotive term.
so that's what I'd say overall. Um, but there are some yeah. Let me break that down. So from the destructive side, I think one of the key things with social media is that it can give an illusion of connection rather than real connection. So we're seeing today, and in fact, in a networking meeting just last week, I was chatting to someone um, who was talking to in the profession she was in. She was mentoring a student just get coming into this profession, and and they that person couldn't have a conversation with this was in nursing, I should say, and
Right.
this person couldn't have a conversation with one of her patients. They didn't know how to do it, and I think, and if that was just a one-off, that'd be a different matter. But I've heard this example again and again and again that people who have essentially been born into the world of social media don't know anything else. It can be a struggle to actually have face-to-face conversations and more used to being on WhatsApp or TikTok and communicating that way than they are face to face. So I think that's a huge problem that is that on one level is you could argue is getting worse, but I'm a positive person. So I kind of look, and I think so that's some of the negative side, but some of the positive sides are that I met so many people over the years who I've connected with through social media, um, the way I learnt about the web. It was kind of like the birth, really, of I feel very privileged to have gone through that stage, actually witnessing the sort of birth of the web and being directly involved in it. I learnt most of that stuff through Twitter.
Right.
People that I connected with on Twitter, and then went to conferences and met up with them. All of that was,
Well,
yeah.
well, Twitter was a different beast back then.
Oh,
It's an
very different,
entirely different platform now, isn't it?
very different. Yeah. So I think, yeah, and this kind of comes back to the purpose. If you know your purpose, why am I on this platform? Yeah, are you on it just because everyone else is on it, or are you on it because you've got a specific goal? You need to publicize your book, or whatever it is. It's having that clear purpose. I think can really help avoid some of the destructive sides of it.
Yeah. So it's like being more deliberate with your time,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
So you can use it as a tool, or even you can use it for the lifestyle stuff that it was really invented for.
mm,
But I guess it's important to put limitations on yourself and make sure it's not controlling you, it's the other way around.
exactly. Yeah, and I guess that naturally ties on to the whole smartphone situation, where um, that's one of the things that draws people in. So if you are only using social media, as I do actually, just on your laptop, because yes, I got rid of my. I like to say, I was going to say downgraded there, but I like to say I upgraded from a smartphone to a and I can't say dumb phone, can I? Because
Yeah,
that's
well, that's
so
what
a
I was going to
feature phone.
say.
Let's call it a feature phone because that's what they used to be called.
Feature phone, yes.
um, so yes, sorry.
So you don't have. So no, I was just going to say to go on. So, but you've got no smartphone. You've got what you're calling a feature phone. Um, so what's brought that on then?
Yeah, so I have to qualify that always. I do have a smartphone, but I have access to it one day a week because from an office that I work out of. So my main phone is an old Nokia. Um, yeah,
Your classic indestructible.
classic. Yeah, yes. Although I should say, not as indestructible these days.
No.
I had the original. I don't know. I can't remember whether it's 6310 or 7310. I had the original back in the day, which was indestructible. They were made solid then,
Hmm.
whereas now they're plastic and yeah, just easy to.
How
Yeah,
disappointing.
it is. Yeah, it's a shame. And just actually, one quick thing on that as well. Just from the features point of view, I used to use the phone a lot. Again, originally, um, via my laptop. So I'd actually send text messages through the software, the Nokia software that they had on the laptop, which obviously made
Okay.
it a lot easier to send text messages. They don't do that anymore.
Oh,
So
you want to get WhatsApp?
no chance. No chance.
WhatsApp web. You can do all of that. And so is that then because obviously something that people talk about a lot, and I imagine comes up a lot in your coaching is habits and habit forming. And people would say, and I think quite fairly, that social media and phones and the constant notifications can interrupt that. Is that one of the reasons that you decided to make that step?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There was definitely several reasons, but certainly from the notifications point of view, I mean, the studies show that when you get interrupted, it can take you on average 23 minutes to get back into the zone where you were before.
Wow. And in that time, another notifications coming through.
Exactly, exactly. So another stat would be, and I don't know, I would imagine this is similar today. Um, you think about the videos that people watch on YouTube, 70% of the videos that people watch are from the recommendations. So basically, that means, it's not the video that you're going to YouTube choosing to watch, that are the majority. You watch that, but then you see the recommendations and you click on that. So 70% of all the videos that are watched are recommendations. So it's not intentional, you know. We're pulled in by the algorithm.
Yeah, it's dictating to you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's what you said before, it's becoming in control of you rather than you being in control of it. And so it's being able to do those kind of things, have that discipline. Like for me, I couldn't control my use of the smartphone. And one of the big things for me at the time was we've spoken about it before, was sport, and particularly football.
Mm.
And I was yeah, I'd probably say I was obsessed. But I was just all the time I was on the BBC Sport website looking at things, and now I don't have that problem at all. In fact, I don't even watch football. There's nothing wrong with
So you've
football.
given up phone, social media, and football,
Yeah.
and you've got loads of businesses, and you've written a book, so maybe it works. I don't think I'd be giving up football though.
Well,
Maybe.
I never thought I would. 36 years I followed Liverpool Football Club, and I was really, um, I was so drawn into it. But for me, it got to the point where I was watching matches that weren't Liverpool, and I didn't even know why I was watching them, and it was just because it was there,
Mm.
and it just. I remember friends of mine who are also into football a lot, maybe not quite as much as me, but still into it a lot. They would come to me to ask me the latest information on their own teams
Wow.
because they knew that I would know.
Wow. So that's quite an extreme difference then, to go from that to nothing at all.
Yeah, but what helped there was lockdown.
Really?
So in terms of giving up my phone, when I started that coaching course, like in the February 2020, I made a commitment with the whole group that I was on, that I was going to give up my phone in 6 months, by the end of the course essentially. And so I had that goal, that
Mm.
purpose to work towards, and that's what I did. But obviously I didn't know that lockdown was going to happen, and then so lockdown happened, and there was no sport. So something that I'd actually been trying to get away from for a while anyway, I was like, I didn't miss it, and it's like, actually, this is bliss.
Wow.
And so I was able to. So I'm not sure whether I would have completely done it
Hmm.
had the lockdowns not happened, had it been cut off and taken away from me without my choice.
It's interesting. It's an unusual benefit of COVID. It
Yes.
helped kickstart that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. It would be fascinating to know, which you can never know whether you'd have done it anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well,
that's
I mean, possibly I would have, but it would have been much slower.
yes, probably it would have taken you a longer time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, because you probably wouldn't have been able to go cold turkey, I suppose.
It would have been very difficult. I mean, I was obsessed, I would
Yeah.
say. I was just, yeah, multiple times a day I was listening to football podcasts, watching lots of it on Sky and
Mm,
BT Sports and stuff. And it was just, yeah, quite consuming.
mm. So to take a completely kind of different tack, one thing that you mentioned earlier was that you run the St Albans
Mm.
Buzz networking, and I think it's quite interesting that to have you on as a host rather than what most people would experience it as someone who's just an attendee. Say just.
Yes. All important.
Probably the most important.
Yes.
But yeah, so what is it like as a host? Has it benefited you as a business to host particularly, or what's your experiences basically?
Yeah, it has. So I can talk about sort of networking as a whole has really helped my business. There's one point where the stats will probably change now, but it was something like 47% of my business came through networking. Um, Now I would probably say it may well be higher than that. But in terms of hosting, so that was another thing that happened through lockdown.
All of
So
your life events
I
happened because of
know.
lockdown.
So, so I was an ambassador, so helping out the host at St Albans Buzz for maybe a couple of years, and um, then she stepped down during lockdown, and so yeah, so I took on the reins, and I'm really glad I did because I love networking. So in terms of how it's benefited my business, I get an opportunity, obviously, every month to talk about my business to a group of 30 odd people, and then so that's great in itself. Of course, through the publicity, people know me as a networker, as a sort of connector, if you like, and so I have people coming to me asking me, "Oh, can you connect me with this person and that?" And so um, it gives me even more of a sort of impetus to have the one-to-ones and follow-ups with people. So I say that at every buzz, encourage people to do their
Yeah.
follow-ups. But and me being a host, um, I I do even more because it's kind of like, well, partly I love it. I just love getting to know people, and even more so than you can do in the networking meeting, and getting to know their businesses. Even just yesterday, someone who didn't actually wasn't able to come to the buzz but liked one of our posts. I got in contact with her, and we had a one to one yesterday. It's just fascinating business, and I love that you meet so many interesting people who are doing such a variety of different businesses. Things that I might not be remotely interested in terms of doing myself, but I love just finding out, why did you do that? Why did you get started? What was your inspiration? And that just interests me no end. So, and I think um, just being out there, and also some of the virtual buzzes. I've got clients who I'm still, one particular one I can think of, who I've been working with for over 2 years. And I met him on a virtual buzz, and so yeah, so it's proved good from that point of view as
Mm,
well, in terms of bringing money in. You don't do necessarily. It's not, you never, as a host, you never expect to do well just out of running it in itself, but it's all the follow-ons in terms of getting clients through connections that can really help.
sure. Yeah, no doubt. And that, obviously, I've attended your event many times,
Yep.
and it's definitely one of the better ones, and that's why I've been so many times. And at the St Albans Buzz, you do get, it's always well attended, I would
Mm.
say. And like you're saying, you meet so many different kinds of people that you wouldn't necessarily normally meet, and that's what I
Mm.
like. Obviously, it brings opportunity professionally,
Mm.
which is obviously what you're there for. But it is, you were talking earlier about the potential loneliness impact of working on
Mm.
your own. Going to these events is a good way of counteracting that, because you all meet loads of people.
Yeah, definitely. And probably one of my most popular blog posts is based on that. It's called "Meeting the Checkout Girl at Morrison's" was the highlight of my week. and,
Well, great headline.
and this was a time, yeah, again maybe a lot of things either seem to happen in lockdown or 10 years ago. So this one was about 10 years ago.
There's a
I
big gap in your
I know
CV.
nothing else happened in between, just these 2 points. But yeah, so about, it was probably a bit more than 10 years ago now. I just yeah, it must have been actually more actually maybe it was more than 14 years ago. I kind of was made redundant from a job I was working in, and and I was part of a big church as well at the time, which for different reasons I moved away from as well. And then there was another thing, a third thing, a network that I was part of. I can't remember what it was. Which so in a short space of time, within a sort of matter of maybe a month or so, my network and regular contact with other people, which was loads, suddenly shrunk. And I was living on my own at the time, and I could go almost 7 days. There was one time I think I counted about 7 days without seeing another human being, and actually with minimal phone calls as well.
Wow.
So and that's not good for anyone. I
No,
don't
that's terrible. Yeah.
encourage anyone to get into that situation. So off the back of that, one of the things I did was take myself off to networking meetings, and it was one of the first networking meetings I went to was where I met that coach that I mentioned earlier,
Right.
first coach that I had. And actually that was a really good story because I didn't actually get to meet her the first month that I went to that networking, but we'd connected over, I think it was meetup.com that
Mhm.
it was promoted on. And she asked me what I did, so I told her I was doing web design at the time. And then, as it happened, she had a boss of hers that needed a website doing, and so I ended up doing a website. And actually, one of those websites I'm still doing,
Excellent.
maintaining all these years later. So, and that was, yeah. So that's another sort of benefit, which obviously I didn't intend, didn't know that was going to happen, but just being there, turning up every month, to doesn't have to be the same group, but just regularly getting out and seeing people, rather than actually having, the checkout person in, being the, highlight of your week in terms of having the conversation. I mean, she wouldn't have known any of that. I mean, this was a real person.
Right. Okay.
Um, uh, but I look forward to having those conversations when I was, getting my tins of tuna and sweet corn and whatever it was.
It sounds like a good dinner. Um, so, but as a someone then who's so well experienced with networking as a host and as a guest, what advice would you give people who want to go to a networking event but don't know exactly what they should be doing?
Yeah. So a few things I would say is firstly, just pluck up the courage. Just go there. You don't necessarily don't worry, but don't overthink things. People can overthink things to the point of I've got to have my 7 second pitch, got to have my know exactly what I'm saying, what I'm even exactly why I'm going there. Sometimes that takes time because actually when I first went there, it wasn't for business. It was simply to connect with other human beings.
Right.
So the business came as a byproduct, which is nice when it happens that way. So, so I would say just get out there is the first thing, and then secondly, be curious. And I think I say that so often to people. Um, I'm sure many people can relate listening to this who've been to a networking meeting. Someone comes up to them, starts talking, says their pitch. It's like you're counting the time going by. They've not even stopped for breath, or certainly haven't asked you a question.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why? Why do that? I was in a networking meeting in London once called Drinks and Links, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. I walked in and I'd hardly been there for a minute, and this guy came up to me saying, "Can I invest in your business?"
Wow.
I'm like, "Sorry, you don't even know my name, let alone what business I run." And
Jesus.
and so he was just going on. I had to stop him in the end and say, what another tip actually is something that I use a lot now is, it's been really interesting talking to you, but I'm going to continue mingling. That's something which, particularly if you're more shy, more introverted, people struggle to get away from other people who, and so just having phrases like that, so it's really good talking to you, but I'm going to continue to mingle. You're there to network. So
Yeah.
it's not, so you've got
It's
to,
not rude to say that.
exactly.
That's I so identify with that as well, because there are so many times I've been talking to someone like, well, I need to not talk to you for the whole event, but you don't want to say I'm going now because it's in any other walk of life that's very rude. But
Yeah.
but it's not in networking, which is
No,
it's kind of a
no.
mindset difference you have to
But
have.
it's still plucking up the courage to do it because sometimes it can still
Yes.
feel rude, even though it's more acceptable in that circumstance.
Mm.
So, yeah, so I just coming back to that being curious, I think the more curious you are about other people, the more you're going to ask questions. So rather than just coming out with a spiel about your business, it's actually, oh, what do you do? Or sometimes you can throw them off. So you can say, what do you do when you're not working? It's
Yeah.
like, so it's just asking questions that get people to think in a different way rather than just sort of the natural stock questions.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that, and it's interesting. I spoke to a sales expert who you happen to know called Ray Wheeler, and he was saying very similar things. Um, it's all about asking questions, and you're not going to want to go to the pub with someone who just talks about themselves. It's the same thing in networking.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you can, another thing allied with the being curious is I kind of talk about be more curious than judgmental. So obviously, particularly in this sort of political correct day and age, it can be difficult to broach, to know what you can and can't say. But actually, I would say if someone says something that you might be immediately offended by, rather than be offended, just be curious. So actually, try that then switches your brain onto asking questions rather than actually just being emotionally, strained and kind of like, oh, I can't believe he said that. So you're actually then thinking, oh, well, what makes you say that? You're just switching your brain in a different way that is actually being more curious rather than, and so you're finding out that person could be having a really bad day, could be so much stuff going on in their life that you just don't know about.
Mm.
That doesn't always, excuse particular behavior, but just finding out why can really soften the situation and just actually really help you connect with them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, being curious and asking questions is a good quality in a person, isn't it? And that they're the people that you want to hang out with outside of anything to do with work. So by the same token, it's going to work in a work situation as well.
Yeah,
Makes
yeah.
perfect sense. And I think that's very valuable information, as has this whole podcast been full of valuable information. But before we end, I thought I'd give you the chance to just say anything that you want to promote or anything like that. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so I guess two things I would say. We've touched on my book before. So, yeah, if you're interested in science fiction, um, then if you go to richardmlalchan.com. So, I'm not sure exactly when this is coming out, but I will be launching a crowdfunding campaign for that book, and that's an exciting sort of journey and process in itself. And if you go to the website, you'll be able to um, sign up for a newsletter as well, where I kind of update people on the journey, and the whole kind of like area of self publishing itself. I could do a whole another podcast on that, because I've just found it fascinating and helped me connect with so many other people. So yeah, that's the main thing I'd say. And then and if you're interested in coaching, then claritycoach.net is where you can go. And particularly if you really want to, I'm so keen to help people understand their purpose and find, and you can just go there and sign up to download this tool, which will help you tease out your purpose. And then if you need follow up coaching off the back of that, then obviously just come back to me. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to discover your purpose.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.